Hi, hello. My name is Maciej Broniarz and I'm a security consultant, and I will try to talk a bit about how not to manage security-related incidents. First of all, is anyone from Gdynia? Okay, I was told that it is very important to make a personal connection with the place that you are in. For example, acknowledge a local football team, okay, but I understand that you are after lunch, that people may be sleeping or yawning and then sleeping or just leaving. But there will be a contest at the end, so stay tuned. I usually have problems with discussing security because people tend to get my incompetence very quickly. This time I will just blame my poor English skills, so try to bear with me. First of all, and that's a general observation, people tend to lie during the audit, and people tend to lie during working with the incident response team. I have no idea why, but it is a very important issue because very often it takes you days to get to the root of the problem because people tell to skip the truth because it's easier for them that way. And Challenger is a great example of that problem because very often within the organization you understand the security issues that you are having. You understand that there is a potential threat that can be exploited by a malicious actor, and you very often tend to ignore it because that's not your area of expertise, or that's not your team, or it's somebody else's problem. And then when a significant amount of people will ignore the issue, that picture turns into something like that. And I came to one observation regarding incident response teams, that when we are talking with the customer, the management of the customer, we are showing them what was wrong and what was done in a bad manner. And then we are talking to the IT team or IT security team, and they said, basically we told our management the same stuff, and they chose to ignore us. And the problem with management is that very often they would rather listen to somebody from outside of the company, even if he's saying the same stuff that the local staff is. So basically, if you're IT management, either trust the people that you're working with or fire them and get a new team because it's useless. And yeah, that was me last night. Some of the scenarios that I will show in a minute seem quite funny. But then again, when you think about them, they are rather depressing because they are showing very, very simple examples of what might cause a really critical problem. And the main issue is that we tend to think that security is a very complex issue and we need to put a lot of effort basically to cover all the areas of security in a company. And then somebody tries to attack us and exploits the easiest way to damage the company. And we say, okay, so basically maybe our strategy that we need to cover or map the whole area and then fix every mapped incident was wrong, and maybe we should basically fix them one by one because that will provide a significant improvements of security. Very often people tend to do stupid things. I like to make photos when I go to my customers' offices, and that is one of them. There was a company who implemented UBK2FA because it improves security, but people tend to lose the keys, and the keys were rather expensive, so the employees were asked to keep them on their desk because they will be saved that way. And that didn't end well, actually. On the other hand, that's a screenshot from a real phishing attack. It was a phishing attack that was sent to one of my customers about 2 or 3 weeks after the awareness training that we conducted for them. And it was sent on a weekend. And the company CEO called us very, very angry Monday morning that it is very unprofessional of us to force him to change his password during the weekend, because what would happen if he was absent and didn't have access to his computer. Fortunately for him, he had access to computer, he changed the password, just wanted to share his comments to us. So we tried to help him undo the damage that he did. Another example, I was working with a company that was hacked, and one of the managers said, basically, we put a lot of money in our security infrastructure and we still get hacked. So it was some kind of very high-profile threat that bypassed security. And he said that they were analyzing, proactively monitoring the security of the company, and they had no clue that anything bad will happen to them. And this is part of the logs from their firewall, and basically for like 3 or 4 days before the attack, they had huge amount of connections from Tor relays. And they had the information before, if they managed to get it, and basically look what the attacker was accessing, what system he was connecting, they would probably be able to avoid the attack. They didn't. When companies try to think about security in a structured way, very often they try to implement ISO. And the problem is that while ISO 2701 is very helpful in managing security, it very often creates a false sense of security for the company because we have ISO implemented, so we are secure. And I try to explain to my customers, okay, you have a very fast car, you have insurance, and that still doesn't allow you to break the law and ride over speed limit. Not because you will get a fine, you can pay the fine, that's it, but basically you can get killed or kill somebody else, and that is the real problem. And it is a screenshot from a real mail from a company that was recertifying their ISO certification. And because the company data center was off-site, and because it was during the pandemic, so the auditing team decided to conduct the audit remotely. Basically to fill the forms, and they have sent the form with the separate document with a key, so all the answers would be correct, and they could recertify the company. This is a checklist that very often companies have regarding security. They have all the right components, they have all the right stuff, and there is a spreadsheet on someone's computer, and there's a printed document stating that we are secure, that we have addressed all the issues and requirements for a company to manage security. The one that I'm really curious about is the next generation firewalls are with us for like 15 years now. And I wonder when they won't be next generation. And very often that list looks something like that, because we have basically everyone checked except the guy that need to conduct the work. And sometimes companies are security compliant on paper, and when you try to scratch a bit, then you see that basically it is just a false impression creating either to make IT management happy or just to keep the management happy. And this is the screenshot from a mail server of one of the companies that was hacked, and I was working with them. They had all the notifications regarding somebody trying to exploit them. But the notifications were being sent in so significant amount that they decided just to filter it and nobody cared to look at them. And it is really a problem, because when you have all the security systems and they send you like 100 notifications a day, they aren't tuned well. And they provide you with information that are rather useless, or your network is really unsecure. But mostly the problem is that you get a lot of a big amount of information that is irrelevant, or the system isn't tuned properly. So maybe if you are struggling with the problem that you get like 200-300 security notifications a day, you should retune the system, and you will get only the notification that you can look into, and they provide you with the information that is really, really helpful. And apart from that, you just have a really false sense of security. The problem is that very often when you try to find a person that is responsible for security in an organization, there isn't one. Still in Poland, majority of companies claim that security is IT-related issue. And it is very hard to analyze your own work in terms of security. I know that it causes a lot of stress in the company when you have a separate security team that basically points at IT team saying that you are doing this and this and that's bad. But that's the only way. If you try to be your own auditor and your own security team, the majority of the results will be useless. And on the other hand, security is very important in media, and basically every day we get informations about another security system breach. Like 2 hours ago, there is information that Polish PESEL registered PESEL registry was hacked, or the data was leaked from the database. So basically, everyone knows about security and at least claims that it is very important for the company. So you run a team, so you try to create a team that will potentially solve the problem, but very often the team stays only on paper. And the main issue is that we forget that IT security and basically incident management isn't just the issue for IT. First of all, you need to have management involved, because there is somebody that will make a decision, and the decision very often influences the future, financial future of the company in a really significant amount. You need the legal team, because with GDPR and other legal frameworks that you need to work with, you just can't skip them. And you need a PR team to communicate. And if you have those four elements, you have a quite large chance to survive the incident. Even better if the company, yeah, that picture is creepy. Even better if the company not only creates the team, but forces the team to work before the incident happens. Very often I am called to a company because they have an incident, and I meet people from the security management team or incident response team, and after a few minutes of talking, I understand that they have just met, or it is the first time they are talking to each other in person in years. But on paper, they have a security team. And the problem is that every person in the team is very valuable, but on the other hand, can screw things up very quickly. Very often there is an IT manager or the manager who claims he knows technical stuff because he was an IT administrator like 25 years ago. And I have seen such incidents when the management, for example, instructed the IT team to immediately shut down the cloud environment because there is a possible incident. The possible incident turned out to be an MPLS issue with the network core. So basically it was not security related, but putting the environment back online took the team like 2 days. And 2 days of the company that is absent from the internet caused them like significant amount of trouble. There is a great PR strategy claiming don't tell anyone. Nothing bad will happen and nobody will leak this information to the press. And very often people tend to do it, even in spite of the situation where they were informed about the incident by regular employees somewhere in Poland. And they still claim that they can keep the information in a closed circuit and nobody else will know. That is not a good strategy, and if you can't get it out, you basically deprive yourself of a chance to control the narration, because you're not the one that provides information and you are instantly put on the defensive. Then again, we have legal team. And there is a joke about legal people and a good start, but I won't tell it because it's streamed online. But the problem is that very often the legal staff tends to focus on the formalities, ignoring the reality. I have seen a customer that had a data center flooded, like a regular flood and water pouring into the data center, and the legal team started by freezing the IT staff and forcing them to fill out a bunch of documents regarding a possibility security incident or inavailability of the infrastructure in the company. Okay, I know I was boring, but and the last one is my favorite. I know that everyone here has a person in IT that claims to be the smartest. And it is very crucial to understand that claiming that I know everything and everything bad that happened isn't my fault, it's not a good strategy. You have a problem, you need to handle it and not to basically put the blame on somebody else. There is another problem, and very often I see security or forensics companies asking the company, for example, to shut down the infrastructure for like five days because they need to create forensic images of their servers for future analysis. And the company says that it is not possible because they need to work. They would rather risk being online with the system that was hacked than being out of business for 5 days, because very often after that 5 days they have no use of coming back, because that's it for them. And the problem is that all of these issues should be discussed beforehand. And if you just make a scenario that, for example, you can be hacked and somebody probably would ask you for images of your data from your servers for analysis, you should think about it before the incident happened. And maybe there is a track where you can just make copies of data or something like that and be able to survive that process. Because very often making the decision, do we shut down, do we stay up, and basically risk future trouble is very difficult for the company. And there isn't a good choice. I like that people claim that they have incident response plans, and when the incident happened, they just need to follow the procedure. Very often, the procedure is perfect on paper and nobody had verified it. And it's great looking at the procedure and, for example, asking how old the procedure is and when it was last updated. And I very often see procedures that are like 10 or 15 years. And if that's the case with you, then you are in a bit of a problem. And on the other hand, you can have procedures and still ignore them, because it is easier, because users have problems with IT or other way around. I worked with a company once who implemented a very strict no remote logging policy. And even if you wanted to access the system from a remote site, like from your home, you need to be allowed for like 1 hour. You need to use like SMS-based authentication, all that stuff. And on paper, it was very secure. And the problem is that people needed to work remotely because the company business model depended on that. So suddenly they started creating a bunch of Gmail accounts and sharing data on Google Drive, and basically the IT infrastructure of the company in terms of data was copied to Google Cloud with no security, no maintenance. But the IT security was very happy that they have no incidents, no data breaches, no leaks, until a leak happened from the source that they were not aware of at the moment. That slide has nothing to do with IT security apart one thing. I was called to a customer like a few weeks ago, and I spent like 2 hours in their conference room playing games because they had their intranet encrypted by ransomware, and they were trying to find a paper copy of the NDA that I was supposed to sign, so I would be able to help them. It's actually cool because when I was a kid, it was my dream to be paid hourly playing games. So that happened in a way. Yeah, and the problem is that the strategies regarding, for example, ransomware still need to be updated, because even if your strategy says, okay, we can pay the ransom, suddenly after February the reality changed, because if the company is attacked by a ransomware group that is Russian-based, it is not so easy to pay ransom. Because you'll be breaking sanctions, and working way around it is very difficult and extremely difficult if you don't want to break the law. And apart from that, there are situations where you feel safe because you have a failover system. For example, your data center has a backup data center, or you have a diesel engine to provide electricity in terms of energy lack. And the problem is that nobody tests those failover mechanisms. I was asked to a customer because they had a data loss, and the data loss was basically created by themselves because they wanted to try switching to their backup data centers. They shut down the electricity in the primary building, and it turns out that powering up the machines caused a failure in the data center that was secondary. So suddenly they had 2 data centers, both down. So it turns to be difficult. And very often the problem is that we don't communicate and we don't share information. A few years ago, I was working with a data breach that was handled by an in-house legal team in the company. And they weren't as nice as lawyers can be. And when we informed them that they have like legal obligation to inform the GDPR office in Poland about the incident, they responded that they will decide when they have enough information to be sure that they probably can suspect an incident. They didn't care to consult with their IT team because it was below them to discuss anything with anybody apart from their own team. And in the meantime, the IT team decided to contact the police and file a legal claim that they were hacked, and basically the clock started a day earlier. So that causes a bit of a problem. Sometimes customers tend to behave in a surprising way. Once I had a company that detected that they were being hacked by a guy from their outsourcing IT team. Basically, he was taking data from their system and providing the data to the competition. And when we provided evidence to the management asked us to contact the guy that was behind the breach and ask him how much money would it take for him to work the other way around. So that was surprising, actually. Then again, as long as we have procedures and we don't try them in real life, or basically we give them to anybody else for verification, a critical verification to be precise, we can have a very weird scenario where there was a company where they fired the IT manager, they conducted the security policy, blocking his account, personal account, blocking his VPN, all that stuff. And they were even saying jokes that the guy is weird because the guy was fired and the guy still comes to the office and sits in the lobby for the whole day. And what the guy was doing was accessing the company public Wi-Fi that was in the building, and using his administrator account, he was just logging onto servers and extracting data to basically sell them to the competition. So everything was fine in terms of the procedure, and still the patient died. The problem with management of the company is that in Poland there is a word niezwłocznie, and for some years it means basically someday. And that is the problem. I sometimes get emails from the customers who require immediate help, and they can schedule the meeting in like 2 weeks. Or, for example, they have a meeting and they decided that the meeting should be conducted again with a larger amount of people involved. So when we get to work, basically there's nothing more we can do but to say the customer that it is too late. And on the other hand, there is a huge economical factor in terms of security, and I know very few companies who understand that security is a cost, but is also an investment, and the security is a process. That it is not enough to just buy a security device claiming we have a security-based device, we have a UTM, we have a firewall, so we are secure. It doesn't work that way. And sometimes customers acknowledge that, for example, they have security devices without support, without updates, but they still have them. Some time ago, I was auditing a company that conducted regular, yearly-based penetration testing. And the penetration testing procedure was working like that. They were given a document with the list of detected vulnerabilities and threats, and the company required that all the potential vulnerabilities would be named or labeled in a particular manner. And then the guy that was managing the IT in the company would just make a document with all the vulnerability numbers and put it on a form stating that he acknowledges all the risks coming from that vulnerabilities, and he did it every year. So they conducted the audit, did nothing about it, everything was fine until they were hacked. Sometimes you can find a security issue that is old enough to vote. And sometimes you look at the company security. It's a screenshot from a real installation of Nessus to one of the company that I worked with. And the security team had scanned their network infrastructure very regularly, at least once a month, and basically do nothing about it. But the scan was conducted because the procedure demanded so, and that's it. As you can see, the amount of critical issues is basically higher every month. And the problem is that Sometimes customers say, okay, we are too small to get hacked, or we are not an interesting target, or basically nobody will pay attention to us. And that is very often not true. If you are a business, then in terms of somebody that is a malicious actor, he doesn't know your financial situation. He is not aware that you may not be able to pay a ransom. He will invest those few days to hack you, even if that won't provide him any profit. So basically being uninteresting isn't a situation that can be self-explanatory. There is a person that should be thanked for this slide actually here. Like two years ago, we had an incident where the guy that was basically migrating a website of a customer from one server to another used Git and forgot to remove the .git directory. And the information with people, parcel numbers, all the personal data was stored in that Git repository. And when we said, okay, that probably is a problem, and we started scanning the company servers for that particular type of data leak, we were a bit astonished to find that they had the problem on like a few dozen servers, and majority of them contained personal information, because it's very cool to just create a dump of a database with tens of thousands of data regarding real people and then just leave it on a Git directory. How many of you use IPv6 in production? I will probably die because yeah. Like 20 years ago, I was at a lecture where a guy that was responsible for Polish 6-bone said that basically we will all be dead before IPv6 will be a dominant network protocol, and he is unfortunately right. There is a problem with IPv6 because the majority of people that use it forget that it is a different network stack. And very often there is a problem where you have tens of thousands of firewall rules regarding IPv4, and you have no security in IPv6. And when we do pen testing, it is very often the easiest way to access the company network because the security of IPv6 is non-existent, to put it mildly. And on the other hand, even if you have security procedure implemented, we worked once with the data center, a large data center with a huge amount of cool certifications and tier 1 labels, very nice place. And we were given an information that we should configure our devices to use VLAN 42. And we decided, okay, let's try any other VLAN or run GFRP on that port. And suddenly we were able, for example, to access the management network of that data center. And the security of the Juniper routers were basically non-existent because they are in a secure VLAN that nobody else has access to, apart from the guy that turns to use the different VLAN that he's supposed to. And that works that way. There was an issue with the network traffic on one of the companies that we were asked to work for. They were paying huge amounts of money for the outgoing traffic. And basically they had no business case that would justify that. And well, it was data. It was encrypted. Basically, it is hard to distinguish what the data actually is. But if you try to Google the company IP addresses, you find out that they have an IPTV service providing HD and 4K services for free for everybody in the internet. So if you, for example, want to watch Polish television in HD, I don't know why, that was actually possible. The team that was responsible for the TV service claimed that they weren't responsible for security. They provided the service was working, everybody could watch TV, and if you need to provide security, that's not their problem. So that's how it works. I like the meaning of ASAP. It is a real email from a real customer that took more than a month to contact us because the issue was critical. And I even asked them why it took them so much time. And they said that they were holding a meeting discussing which company they should contact. So it was really a funny situation because when we agreed to work with them, they sent us disks with images from VMware from their data center for analysis. And I called them like within a day and say, okay, the package arrived, but you are missing one server. There is one Active Directory controller that we don't have an image. And they said, no, that's not possible. We have 3 AD controller. We have sent you 3 images. No, 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 you have 4. And after a brief discussion, we found out that the intruder hacked their network, installed another Windows machine on their VMware, connected to the Active Directory, and tested policy scripts to infect the whole network with the ransomware. And when he was able to have a satisfactory result, he started the script, rebooted all the machines, infected all the computers, and that was it for the company. But it took him like 2 months. So basically the IT team in the company didn't notice another Active Directory server for like 2 months within their own data center. And they didn't have like 2,000 servers, they have like a dozen, so. And some time ago, we had a problem with a company that was unable to conduct sales in their shops. They had shops all over Poland, and basically the internal network was down. The internal network was down because the Windows machines were infected by some kind of ransomware, and the point of entry was an offsite data center. Data center was in the house of CEO of the company because like 20 years ago, he used to manage the IT for the company. So even if it was outsourced now, he still had an Active Directory controller on his home as a computer that his kids were able to access to watch videos on YouTube and download some shit from the internet. So, and, sorry. Very often the problem with security isn't IT related. And it's very hard for us to remember that because we tend to look for a IT security solution, and basically we expect that the problem would be IT. And sometimes it's really not, sometimes it's just a human factor. There was a customer who contacted us because there were people stealing from them, and he thought that somebody had breached his access management system. And the log from the access management system basically looked like that. And the guy that would leave the gate and then like a few minutes later would access the data center would either teleport or there is a B location available from some saints. So there were 2 choices. And the problem was quite simple. The company was, so to say, not eager to spend any money on updating systems. So the go-to mechanism for adding new access point for new users was basically this. And people noticed that you can just clone a card. So they did. And when we asked the IT team to provide their cards for analysis, the whole IT team was like 25 to 30 people. All of them were using the same card with the same ID. And basically every employee that left the company had like 2 or 3 cards with him. So there was no, we were unable to control basically who entered, who left, and what is the, and we asked the manager of the company, okay, but you still probably have cameras, and we can analyze the videos and basically point what person accessed the company who shouldn't be able to. And they responded that they have no cameras within the building because they respect the privacy of the workers very much. And it is great to respect privacy, but it's even greater to respect security as well. Okay, so basically that is an image that all of us seen sometime in our life, and we understand how that should work. And very often if the IT team behaves like a bastard operator from hell, people tend to avoid IT teams. Sometimes I'm working with customers and the customers are asking, could we just not contact the IT team because we don't want to work with them? And if you don't want to work with your IT team, there is something very, very wrong within the company. But there was a company that implemented that model, that was very secure, that all the systems were filtered by a firewall, the access was restricted to the sites that you should be able to access, all that stuff. And that there was a bypass. And basically, like, each other department was able to order their own internet access, accepted by their own manager, and the security in the company was non-existent. That switch you can see in the back was basically a switch that was bridging all the network, the internal network of the company, and that weird kind of DMZ that was created. Okay, and before I bore you to death, there are a few things I would hope at least, you should remember, because it might help you at some point. First of all, yeah, having a written protocol procedure is great, but testing it, analyzing it, and putting it to some open critique is even better. Very often a good procedure is to just show your procedures to the employees and say, okay, what do you don't like about that procedure, or what should you change? If you have people that were working with the company, then probably they care about the company a bit, so basically try to benefit from that. If you are lying during the audit or during an incident response, that's your problem. We don't care. We will bill you either way, and that's it. You are just wasting your time, and basically you are putting yourself at risk. That's for you to decide. It is very often better to think for a moment before doing something. I know that incident response tend to have like an emergency feeling that you need to make decisions very quickly, and that's not usually the case. Very often you see a situation where you really don't have that 15 minutes to think about the problem, find a different approach, analyze what is bad in the idea that you just created and want to implement. So it is really great to just think for a moment before you do something that is, for example, irreversible. You're not the only person that means well, and you're not the only person that cares about the company. While working in IT, we tend to have an approach that we are the smartest and everybody apart from us is dumb. That the business doesn't know what they are doing, lawyers don't know what they are doing, etc., etc. That is not usually the case. Even if you are the smartest, there are pretty smart people in the company in every area, and we should at least listen to them before we do anything. And don't be afraid to ask for help. If you are unsure about the security of your network, or you have issues that you aren't able to handle yourself, it is really a better idea to ask for help before something bad happened, than find somebody who will just provide you with assistance where you have a huge incident and just try to manage the shit that hit the fan. So, thank you very much, and for the contrast that I promised earlier, I was informed that using memes during a presentation is not professional, so I send regards to the person. And apart from that, the first person that will, without Googling, either DM me with the name of all the horsemen of the apocalypse from that slide, and will list all the movies that were used in the presentation, will be given an award. So feel free to contact me and I will get back to you with the prize.